Welcome back to Faith Journey Hub. There is an objection, over 2,000 years old, that supposedly destroys the central claim of Christianity. It says Jesus cannot possibly be the Messiah because of his family tree. Today I want to show you why that objection completely falls apart. Start with the rule everyone agrees on. The Hebrew prophets are crystal clear. The Messiah must be a descendant of King David. Jeremiah says it, Ezekiel says it, a king from David's own bloodline who would sit on David's throne forever. So far, so simple. But here is where it gets complicated. The critics, both Muslim and Jewish anti-missionaries, point at the genealogy of Jesus and say it has two fatal flaws. Problem 1, the virgin birth. Problem 2, an ancient curse. And on the surface, both problems look devastating. So let us take them one at a time and watch what actually happens. Matthew traces the family line of Joseph all the way back to King David. Perfect, except for one thing. Matthew also says Joseph was not the biological father. Jesus was born of a virgin. So the critic pounces. If Joseph is not the real father, then how does David's royal bloodline pass down to Jesus at all? But here's the thing the critics miss. The claim was never that Joseph transferred a bloodline he did not have. Jesus already had David's blood through his mother Mary. What Joseph gave him was the legal right to the throne of David, the same way an adopted son inherits his father's name and title. Two things are going on here, not one. The critics fire back. You cannot pass a tribal line by adoption, they say. A priest who adopts a boy from another tribe cannot simply make him a priest. It sounds airtight. But here's the problem. Where does the Hebrew Bible actually say there can be no exceptions? Because when you look, the exceptions are right there. Look at this. David's sons who are not from the tribe of Levi are literally called priests. The Hebrew word is kohanim, and across the entire Bible it means one thing, priest. The scholar Michael Brown notes the rabbis themselves squirmed at this verse because the meaning is undeniable. Non-Levites serving as priests. And it goes further. David himself built an altar and offered burnt offerings to the Lord. Solomon offered sacrifices 3 times a year and burned incense before God. These were kings, not Levites yet. They performed priestly acts. The neat little rule the critics built their whole case on already has holes in it. And this was not an accident or a slip. Michael Brown points out that the later parallel passage in Chronicles changes the wording to chief officials as if to soften it. But 2 Samuel says it plainly. David's sons were priests. David himself was a priestly king, a living shadow of the one to come, who would be both king and priest forever. The rule had exceptions because the rule was pointing to the Messiah. And here is the clincher. God commands that Joshua, a Levite, the high priest, be crowned and seated on a throne to rule, even though rulership was promised to David's line. A priest made a king, and he is called a sign, a symbol of the coming branch, the Messiah. The exceptions are everywhere. Problem 1 is already unraveling. Now the second problem, and this is the one the critics love most. The curse of Jeconiah. Joseph descends from a king named Jeconiah, and God pronounced a terrifying curse over him. If this curse means what the critics think it means, then no descendant of Joseph could ever sit on David's throne, including Jesus. Listen to it. Write this man childless. None of his seed will sit on David's throne or rule in Judah again. It sounds absolute, final. A locked door slams shut on the whole royal line. The critics say case closed. Jesus is disqualified, but they stopped reading too soon. Now hold on to this image because it becomes the key that unlocks everything. God tells Jeconiah, even if you wore the signet ring on my own right hand, I would tear you off and throw you down. The signet ring. Remember that phrase, because God is about to use it again and completely reverse it. Read it again, carefully. The curse says he shall not prosper in his days. In his days. It never says forever. It never says for all generations. It was a judgment on Jeconiah's own lifetime, not an eternal seal on his bloodline. And how do we know for sure? Because God himself reverses it. God had told Jeconiah, even if you were the signet ring on my right hand, I would pull you off. But now, to Jeconiah's own grandson Zerubbabel, God says the opposite. I will make you like my signet ring, for I have chosen you. That is not a curse. That is a curse being lifted. And here's the twist. The critics really do not want you to know. Their own Jewish sources say the curse was reversed. The Talmud says exile atoned for Jeconiah's sin. The Midrash says God pardoned him completely. The Jewish Encyclopedia says plainly God revoked the decree, and Jeconiah even became the ancestor of the Messiah. Read the rabbi's own words. After the exile, Jeconiah had sons. The line that God said was cut off kept right on going. One rabbi wrote that the Messiah himself would descend from Zerubbabel, Jeconiah's grandson. So the very tradition the critics quote demolishes their own objection. The curse is not the wall they think it is. And it is not just one source. Leviticus Rabbah says God pardoned all of Jeconiah's sins. The Midrash Tanhuma says the Messiah will descend from Zerubbabel. The 19th century Rabbi Malbim explains that Haggai's signet ring points to the King Messiah who springs from Jeconiah's seed. The critics quoted a curse, but their own greatest scholars quoted its cancellation. Now, some object, sure, but where's the proof that Mary herself descended from David? And the answer is woven all through the New Testament. Because if Jesus had no human father, then his royal blood, his descent from David, could only have come from one place: his mother. The angel Gabriel tells Mary that God will give her son the throne of his father David. And over, the crowds cry out to Jesus, "Son of David, have mercy on us." Paul says he was descended from David according to the flesh. The blood of David runs in his veins, Mary's blood. Peter, preaching to thousands in Jerusalem, says God swore an oath to David to place his own descendant on his throne, and that descendant is the risen Jesus. Paul calls him the offspring of David. Revelation calls him the root of David. The blind man Bartimaeus, the Canaanite mother, the crowds in the street, all of them cry it, "Son of David." Nobody around Jesus doubted his royal blood. The critics have one more card to play. Fine, they say even if Mary descended from David, tribal line only passes through the father, not the mother. But once again, the Hebrew scriptures already carved out exceptions, and the first one changed the law of Israel forever. 5 sisters, the daughters of Zelophehad, stood before Moses. "Our father died with no sons," they said. "Why should his name disappear?" And God ruled in their favor. If a man has no son, his inheritance and his line passes through his daughter. Right there, the line runs through the woman. Here is a second example, and it is from the tribe of Judah, the exact same tribe as David. A man named Sheshan had no sons, only daughters. So his line continued through his daughter, and her descendants carried on the Judean bloodline. Once again, the tribe passes through the woman. The rule the critics invented keeps colliding with the text. And then there is Ruth, a foreign woman, a Moabite widow, who married into the tribe of Judah to preserve her dead husband's family name. And through her, through a woman and a foreigner, the line continued. Her son became the grandfather of King David himself. The most royal bloodline in Israel flows straight through a woman. The story is deliberate. Boaz stands at the city gate before 10 elders and redeems the land and the widow to raise up the name of the dead. And the whole town blesses it. "May your house be like the house of Perez," they cry, "born to Judah." The son that Ruth bore became the grandfather of David, which means the royal line of Israel, and the line of the Messiah himself flowed through a woman and a foreigner grafted in by grace. That is not a bug in the story. It is the message. Now watch this. The Muslim critic has a problem of his own, because the Quran itself says Jesus descends from Abraham even though it agrees he had no human father. The famous commentator Ibn Kathir spells it out. Descent, he says, can pass through the daughter's side. Jesus is counted in Abraham's line through his mother. Ibn Kathir records a fascinating exchange. A governor challenged a scholar, demanding proof from the Quran that Jesus belonged to Abraham's offspring. The scholar pointed to the passage naming Jesus among Abraham's seed, then asked, "Is Jesus not from Abraham's line, though he had no father?" And the governor admitted, "You have spoken the truth. Descent through the mother, confirmed by Islam's own scholars." Do you see the trap? If the critic insists that lineage can never pass through the mother, then he has not just attacked the gospel. He has contradicted his own Quran, which traces Jesus to Abraham through Mary. The objection, if true, destroys the very book he is defending. Now here is the elegant part. Joseph's line runs through Solomon that carries the legal right to the throne. But Mary's line, in Luke, runs through David's other son, Nathan, that carries the physical bloodline. Put them together, and Jesus has both, the legal crown and the royal blood, a complete and airtight claim. And think about this. The gospel writers could have made life easy for themselves. They could have simply invented a genealogy running Mary straight through Solomon and silenced every critic forever. But they did not. They reported the family lines honestly, exactly as they were. Men fabricating a religion do not leave the hard questions on the page. Men telling the truth do. But now the tables turn completely, because the Quran introduces a genealogy problem of its own, and it is a serious one. The Quran calls Mary the mother of Jesus, the sister of Aaron, and it names her father Imran, the same name as the father of Moses and Aaron. But there is a 1500-year problem. Miriam, the sister of Moses and Aaron, daughter of Amram, lived roughly 15 centuries before Mary, the mother of Jesus. Yet the Quran gives Mary the same brother and the same father. It appears to confuse two completely different women, separated by 1,000 years and more. Defenders say it is just a metaphor, like calling Jesus the son of David. But it does not hold. The Jews never once used brother of or sister of to mean a distant ancestor. Not in the Bible, not in the Talmud, not anywhere. Lineage was always son of or daughter of. The problem cannot be waved away. Even Muhammad was asked about this directly. The Christians of Najran pressed him, "You call Mary the sister of Aaron, yet Moses came long before Jesus." His answer was that people used to name their children after the prophets of old. But that answer does not fit. The text does not say Mary was named after Aaron. It calls her his sister and gives her his father. A name is not a sibling. The critic also claims God threw Israel away and replaced them with another people. But that is not the Bible's teaching at all. God did not replace Israel. He expanded the family, grafting in people from every nation, Jew and Gentile together, made one through the Messiah. He has made the two into one, Paul writes, one new people, the wall of hostility torn down. And God does not break his promises to Israel either, because God does not lie and he does not change his mind. The gifts and the calling of God, Paul says, are irrevocable. This was never replacement. It was always a widening door. Paul lifts our eyes higher still. There is a Jerusalem above, he says, the free city, the mother of all who believe. And Peter takes the ancient titles that once belonged only to Israel, a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, and applies them to everyone from every background who trusts the Messiah. Not because Israel was cast off, but because the promise made to Israel was always meant to Israel, was always meant to overflow to the whole world. The door did not close, it opened wider. And underneath all of it is the bedrock of who God is. God is not a man that he should lie. He does not say a thing and fail to do it. The critic imagines a God who makes promises to Israel and then walks away. But the God of the Bible cannot break his word. Every promise to David, every promise to Israel, every promise to Israel, every promise about the Messiah stands unshakable because the one who spoke them does not change. And the destination is breathtaking. Not a nation swapped for another nation, but a new Jerusalem coming down from heaven, its gates carved with the names of the 12 tribes of Israel, its foundations with the 12 apostles, Israel and the nations, the old covenant and the new, woven together into one eternal city where God himself will dwell with his people forever. Before we reach the name, notice how the prophets keep circling back to this one royal family. A shoot from the stump of Jesse, David's own father. A branch from the roots of that fallen tree. Israel's monarchy would be cut down to a stump, but out of it, one final branch would grow, and the Spirit of God himself would rest upon him. But we have saved the biggest question for last. It is one thing to prove that Jesus is the rightful Davidic Messiah. It is another thing entirely to ask what the prophets said that Messiah would be. Because Jeremiah gives the Messiah a name, and it is the name of God himself. The righteous branch, the coming king, will be called the Lord, our righteousness. And in Hebrew, the Lord is Yahweh. The king's own name is Yahweh, our righteousness. Now the critics have an answer ready. Lots of Hebrew names contain God's name, they say. Elijah, Gedaliah. It does not make the person God. But here is the difference. Names like Elijah or Gedaliah, God's name is shortened, cut down to Yah. But in Jeremiah, the name of the Messiah is the full, complete, unabbreviated Yahweh. That is not an accident. The prophet is signaling something. This king carries the covenant name of God in a way no ordinary person ever did. Compare it to King Zedekiah. His name also contains God's name, but there, the sacred name is broken up and tucked at the end, the way ordinary Hebrew names are built. Zedekiah was no righteous king, and no one thought he was God. But the Messiah's title is different in form, different in placement, and different in meaning. The prophet is drawing a line under it. This one is unlike all the others. Now the critic tries one last escape. Names get shortened all the time, he says. Michael becomes Mike, Samuel becomes Sam, so the full form in Jeremiah means nothing. But that misses the whole argument. The point was never merely that the name is unabbreviated. The point is that everything lines up at once, the full covenant name, and a king who is himself righteous, who himself does righteousness, who himself brings righteousness to his people. Form and meaning, together, pointing to one conclusion. And this is exactly what the apostles announced. In Christ, Paul writes, the whole fullness of deity dwells bodily, not a fraction of God, not a reflection or a symbol, the complete fullness of the eternal God, living inside a human body. The name Jeremiah wrote, Yahweh, our righteousness, walked the roads of Galilee with dust on his feet. And this matters, because the God who names the Messiah after himself is a God who does not change. He does not lie. He does not go back on his word. So when the prophet writes that the coming king is Yahweh, our righteousness, he means exactly what he says. The eternal, unchanging God was going to step into his own creation as the son of David. And there is a second clue. Read the whole passage. It says the king himself is righteous, that the king himself does what is right, that the king himself brings righteousness to all of God's people. So the name is not describing some other God the king serves. It is describing the king. He is Yahweh, our righteousness, because he is Yahweh. And the prophets keep pressing in on the same astonishing point. A virgin will bear a son, Isaiah says, and his name will be Emmanuel. And Emmanuel does not mean a servant of God or a prophet of God. It means God with us. The child of the virgin would be God, come to dwell among his people. The same virgin birth the critics attacked was the sign of God stepping into flesh. Micah names the town Bethlehem and then says something impossible about the ruler who would be born there. His origins are from of old, from ancient days, from everlasting. A child would be born in time, in a specific town, on a specific night, yet his existence reaches back before time itself. Only God is from everlasting. And Jeremiah is not alone. Isaiah looks at the same coming. King, a child born on David's throne, and calls him Mighty God, Everlasting Father. In Hebrew, El Jibber, the exact title Isaiah gives to Yahweh himself one chapter later. Two prophets, one conclusion. The Messiah is God in human flesh. And David himself saw it. The Lord said to my Lord, David calls the Messiah his Lord, sit at my right hand. How can David's son also be David's Lord, seated on the throne of heaven? Jesus asked the religious leaders that very question, and they had no answer. There is only one. The Messiah is both David's son and David's God. And then the New Testament removes all doubt. Hear the Father himself speaking about the Son. Your throne, O God, is forever and ever. The Father calls the Son God. This is the same King Jeremiah called the Lord, our righteousness, the same child Isaiah called Mighty God, the same Lord David saw at God's right hand. Prophet after prophet, apostle after apostle, all saying the same impossible, glorious thing: the Messiah is God. And Jesus said it about himself in words no one could miss. Before Abraham was, I am. Not I was, I am. He reached back to the burning bush where God told Moses his name, I am, and he placed that name on himself. The crowd understood instantly and picked up stones to kill him. The king with the name of Yahweh was standing right in front of them. And when the risen Jesus stood before Thomas, the doubter fell at his feet and said the only thing left to say, My Lord and my God. He did not rebuke him. He did not correct him. He received the worship because it was true. The son of David, the offspring of Jesse, the king with the name of Yahweh standing there alive, receiving the worship due to God alone. And Daniel saw him in a night vision, one like a son of man, coming on the clouds of heaven. But search the scriptures. Only God rides the clouds. This Son of Man is given everlasting dominion, and every nation, every language, serves and worships him. A human figure receiving the worship of all creation. The Messiah is the Son of David and the Ancient of Days. And Zechariah records God speaking in the first person about a day still to come. They will look on me, God says, on me whom they pierced. When was God pierced? At a hill called Calvary, when the nails went through the hands of Jesus. God said they would pierce him, and they pierced the Son of David, because the Son of David is God. So put it all together. The virgin birth, no problem. The curse of Jeconiah reversed by God himself. The line through Mary real and royal. The Nathan line, the Solomon line, blood and legal right, united in one man. And the name the prophet gave him, Yahweh, our righteousness. Jesus is the rightful son of David, and Jesus is Yahweh God. And Jesus says it about himself. I am the root of David, the one who created David, and the descendant of David, the child born of his line, the root and the offspring, God and man. Only Yahweh in the flesh could ever be both at once. Step back and look at what happened. Every single objection meant to bury the claim of Jesus turned into another confirmation of it. The virgin birth pointed to Mary's royal line. The curse pointed to God's mercy and reversal. The genealogies pointed to the honesty of the writers, and the name pointed to the deity of the king. The harder you press the objection, the brighter the truth shines through. Jesus is the Christ, and Jesus is Yahweh. So the objection that was supposed to destroy the claim of Jesus ends up confirming it. He is the Son of David. He is the Lord, our righteousness. The question is no longer whether he qualifies. The question is what you will do with him. Will you bow to the divine Messiah, the root and offspring of David, Yahweh, come in the flesh as your Lord and your God? This study was based on the work of the Christian apologist Sam Shamoun, and we are grateful for his careful research. Thank you for watching Faith Journey Hub. If this strengthened your faith, share it with someone who is wrestling with these questions. Drop a comment, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss what is next. God bless you and keep seeking the truth. I will see you next time.